She packed her bags in silence, took our son by the hand, and walked out without a backward glance. I didn't know where they went until I saw a photo of them with her ex, smiling in front of a mansion. But I never imagined that a birthday party would flip everything upside down. My name is Caleb Mercer. I'm a freelance web developer based out of Portland, Oregon. It's not the flashiest job, but it gave me something I always wanted: freedom. Freedom to be home, to make pancakes for my son on Saturday mornings, to kiss my wife on her way out the door, and to live a life that felt whole. At least that's what I thought. For a long time, everything felt right. My wife, Leela, had this easy smile, the kind that softened the edges of a bad day. We met in college, stayed together through thin paychecks and leaky apartments, and promised ourselves we'd never forget what we built from scratch. When our son, Evan, came into our lives, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just a man anymore. I was a father, and I poured everything I had into being good at it. Mornings were my favorite. Evan would crawl into bed with us, dragging his stuffed dinosaur and whispering secrets about his dreams. Leela would laugh, pull the blanket over all of us, and for a few fleeting minutes, it felt like the world stopped just for us. We didn't have much. Our car was old, our furniture was mismatched, and vacations meant visiting the lake an hour away. But I didn't care. I was building a home, not the kind made of walls and furniture, but of moments and laughter. Still, looking back now, I realized there were signs, little cracks that I chose not to see. Leela started going quiet during dinner. Her phone buzzed more often. She seemed distracted, sometimes staring at Evan like she was memorizing him. I'd ask if she was okay, and she'd smile that same soft smile, but it didn't reach her eyes anymore. I didn't push, maybe I should have. Maybe I was too content, too blind in my little bubble of good enough. Because one day, without warning, that bubble popped. And nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for what came next. It started small, the kind of small you convince yourself doesn't matter. Leela began staying out later than usual. At first, it was work. "Just a late meeting," she'd say, kissing Evan goodnight after missing dinner. Then it became grabbing coffee with an old friend. I wanted to believe her, needed to, but something in her voice made me pause, not the words, but how distant they felt, like they were rehearsed. One evening, I picked up her phone by mistake. Ours looked almost identical, and I was in a hurry to check a delivery notification. When the screen lit up, I saw a name I hadn't heard in years. Grayson. I froze. Grayson Beck, her ex-boyfriend from before me. Wealthy, smooth-talking, the kind of guy who wore suits for fun and once sent her flowers so big they couldn't fit through a door. I remember her telling me it ended because he was always chasing status, not connection. So why was he texting her now? The message wasn't anything explicit, just a "great seeing you today, let's talk more soon." But my stomach tightened. I asked her about it later that night, trying not to sound paranoid. She didn't flinch. He reached out on LinkedIn, said he was in town. We grabbed lunch, that's all. I wanted to believe her. But from that point on, things shifted. I started waking up to an empty side of the bed. She began dressing nicer, not for me, not for family dinners, for meetings. She smiled less at home, laughed more when texting. Evan noticed too. He once asked, "Why doesn't Mommy come to the park anymore?" I didn't have an answer. One Saturday, I asked her if she was happy. She didn't lie, she just stared at me for a long moment and whispered, "I don't know." That silence, it hurt more than yelling ever could. I told myself all couples go through rough patches, that maybe she was just restless or tired or overwhelmed by motherhood. I cooked more, cleaned more, bought flowers, even planned a weekend getaway. She canceled last minute, said something about a family emergency. I never found out whose family she meant. And though I kept pretending things were normal, deep down I could feel it. I was losing her. It happened on a Tuesday. Ordinary, quiet, forgettable until it was. I had just wrapped up a client call when I noticed the house felt hollow, too quiet for mid-afternoon. Evan's toys were missing from the living room. His tiny shoes weren't by the door. I called out, half joking, "Did you two run away from the mess again?" No answer. I walked into our bedroom. The closet was open. Half her clothes were gone. At first, I just stood there, like if I stayed still long enough, this wouldn't be real. On the dresser, a folded note sat next to her wedding ring. I picked it up with shaking hands. There were only 3 sentences. "Caleb, I'm sorry. I need something more. Evan's with me. We're staying with someone who can give him the life he deserves." There was no signature, no "I'll call you," no number, just silence. I don't remember sitting down, but I ended up on the floor, that note crushed in my fist. My throat burned. I wanted to scream, to cry, to break something, but all I could do was stare at that empty closet, the echo of her goodbye ringing in my ears. I called her, no answer, again voicemail. I texted, nothing. I called her sister, her best friend, even her mother. No one knew anything, or maybe they did and didn't want to say. I felt like I was going insane. My mind went through every possibility. Had she been planning this for months? Did Evan even know what was happening? By that evening, panic gave way to numbness. I sat at the kitchen table with his favorite cup, the one with the rocket ships, and just stared at it like it might explain something. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I opened social media for a distraction. That's when I saw it, a photo Leela's friend had posted. She was in it. So was Evan. And standing beside them, arm around her waist, was Grace and Beck. They were smiling, all three of them, in front of a mansion. My throat tightened. I zoomed in, hoping, praying it wasn't what it looked like. But it was. She hadn't just left me. She had taken my son and moved in with her rich ex. The days that followed were a blur. I stopped counting them after the first week. Every morning felt like waking up to the same nightmare. The house was too quiet, not peacefully quiet, but dead quiet. No cartoons playing in the background, no little feet running across the floor, no soft laughter coming from the kitchen. Just silence and the ticking of a clock that suddenly felt louder than it ever had before. I didn't tell anyone at first, not my friends, not my clients, not even my brother. How do you explain something like that? My wife left me. She took our son and moved in with the man she once swore she'd never love again. It sounded pathetic, like I'd failed as a husband, as a father, as a man. I still had Evan's drawings pinned on the fridge. One of them was a stick figure family, three of us, holding hands under a bright orange sun. I stared at it every morning like it could somehow pull me back to the version of my life that made sense. Food stopped mattering. I skipped meals without meaning to. Some days I didn't shower. Work piled up, unanswered emails buried under more unanswered emails. I couldn't focus. All I could think about was where Evan was sleeping, who was tucking him in, who was reading him bedtime stories. Was it Grayson now? The thought made me sick. I called a lawyer, but the process was slow. Since there wasn't a formal custody arrangement yet, I had no immediate legal way to bring Evan back. It would take time, court dates, evaluations, mediations. But time was the one thing I didn't have the strength for. Every night I stared at my phone, waiting for a call that never came. Sometimes I'd whisper, "Good night, buddy," hoping maybe somehow he could hear me. One night I broke. I sat on Evan's bed, held his tiny pillow to my chest, and cried like I hadn't in years. The kind of crying that shakes your whole body. I wasn't just mourning the loss of my family, I was mourning who I used to be when I had them. The emptiness didn't just fill the house, it filled me. And I didn't know how to escape it. Weeks passed, the numbness didn't leave, but it shifted. It became quieter, heavier, less like a knife, more like a dull weight strapped to my chest. I still hadn't seen Evan in person, but one afternoon out of nowhere, Leela texted me. "Evan wants to FaceTime you tonight, 7 p.m. I stared at the message like it might vanish. My hands shook as I typed back a simple yes. That call, it only lasted 7 minutes, but it wrecked me. Evan's face lit up the screen, round and soft and so full of life. "Hi, Daddy," he shouted, waving his dino plush. My heart squeezed. I forced a smile, told him I missed him, asked him how he was. He talked about a new toy car, about a swimming pool. "Grayson lets me ride on his shoulders," he said, laughing. I tried to hide the sting in my chest. "That's cool, buddy. Are you having fun?" He nodded, but then after a moment his smile faded. "Why don't you come too?" I didn't know what to say. Leela's voice came in from the background, calm, distant. "Okay, say goodbye to Daddy." He pouted, "Can I talk longer?" She didn't answer. The screen went black. I sat there for a long time, staring at my reflection in the dark screen, my own smile still frozen and empty. After that, the calls came once a week. Scheduled, timed, monitored. I cherished them even if they were brief. I'd save little stories to tell him, goofy faces to make him laugh. He laughed less each week. His sentences got shorter. He started calling me Dad instead of Daddy. I could feel the gap widening. I started sending him drawings, notes, a small box with his favorite cookies and a little wooden robot I carved during one of my sleepless nights. I didn't even know if he got them. Leela rarely responded. Sometimes she'd text back a flat, "He got the box, thanks." The hardest part wasn't the distance. It was the feeling of being slowly erased, like I was being replaced memory by memory. But I wasn't ready to give up. I couldn't, because even if Evan's voice grew quieter on those calls, I held on to the hope that somewhere deep down, he still remembered how much his dad loved him. I knew I couldn't live like that forever, just existing, waiting for 7-minute calls, hoping for scraps of connection with my own son. Something inside me started to shift, not all at once but slowly, like an ember catching in cold ashes. One morning I stood in the bathroom, stared at the stubble on my face, the dark bags under my eyes. I looked like a ghost of the man I used to be. And in that moment I made myself a promise I would not let Evan grow up thinking his father disappeared. I started small. I shaved, took a long shower, made breakfast, not just toast but real food. Eggs, pancakes, the kind Evan used to love. I sat alone at the table, but it felt like a step. Next I cleaned the house. Not just a surface wipe, I went room by room, clearing clutter, scrubbing floors, organizing drawers. Every toy I picked up, every sock I folded felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. It hurt, but it helped. Then I tackled work. I reopened my laptop and forced myself to respond to emails. I reconnected with old clients, reached out for new projects. For the first time in weeks, I actually felt my brain turn back on. The first check that hit my account made me cry, not because of the money, but because it reminded me I was still capable. Still useful. One day, while going through a box of Evan's old things, I found a voice recorder we used to play with. I pressed the button and heard a tiny voice say, "Hi, Daddy, you're my best buddy." I sat on the floor and held that recorder to my chest. That moment shattered me, but it also lit a fire. I started recording messages, one every night, telling Evan about my day, reading him bedtime stories, saying goodnight. I stored them all in a private folder. I didn't know if he'd ever hear them, but I needed to keep speaking to him even if it was into the dark. With each day I felt stronger, not healed, but more alive. I didn't have Leela, I didn't have Evan under my roof, but I had purpose again. And I started preparing for something else too. Evan's birthday was coming up. And I had a plan. Evan's birthday was just a week away. I found myself counting down the days like a countdown to a lifeline. Even though I hadn't seen him in months, I wanted that day to be special for him, and maybe for me too. Then one afternoon, I got an unexpected message. It was from an unknown number, a simple text with a photo attached. The photo was of an invitation, glossy, expensive-looking, embossed with gold lettering. It read, "You're invited to celebrate Evan's 6th birthday. Join us at Grace and Beck's estate, Saturday, 3 p.m. My heart slammed against my ribs. Why was I getting this? I knew the invitation wasn't meant for me. It was sent to the wrong number, maybe by accident. Or maybe someone wanted me to see it. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to stay in the safety of my small apartment and pretend none of this was happening. But another part, the part that missed Evan more than air, screamed for a chance. A chance to be there. I called Leela, no answer. I texted, no reply. Then, after hours of debate, I made a decision. I was going to show up. I didn't know what to expect. A cold welcome, an angry glare, or maybe they'd just tell me to leave. But I had to try. This wasn't just a birthday party. It was a test, a moment where I could either fight for my son or lose him forever. That Saturday afternoon, as I drove to the mansion, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tight they turned white. The city blurred past me, but all I could focus on was the image of Evan's smile, the sound of his laughter, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, this day could change everything. The mansion loomed ahead, every inch the picture of wealth, towering columns, perfectly manicured gardens, and a fountain that sparkled in the afternoon sun. I parked my old car in the driveway, feeling out of place, like a shadow cast against a world I no longer belonged to. I hesitated at the front door, heart pounding, then took a deep breath and walked in. Inside, laughter filled the air, children running, adults chatting in expensive clothes, and there was Evan. He looked older, his cheeks flushed with excitement, wearing a bright blue shirt and that same wide smile I'd missed so much. Beside him stood Grayson, arms wrapped around my son like a trophy. When Evan saw me, his eyes widened. For a moment I thought he might run to me, but then he glanced at Grayson and stayed rooted. Leela was there too, her face calm but unreadable. She met my gaze briefly and then looked away. I swallowed the lump in my throat and stepped forward. "Happy birthday, Evan." He smiled softly, a little shy. "Thanks, Dad." The party went on around us, but time seemed to slow. I watched him blow out candles, open gifts, and laugh with other kids, but my heart was torn. Could he still feel the love I'd poured into every bedtime story, every scraped knee I'd kissed, every night I'd stayed awake worrying about him? After the cake, Grayson approached me. His smile was polite but firm. "Caleb, this isn't really your scene. Maybe it's best if you go." I nodded, my voice catching. I just wanted to see him. Leela joined us then, her eyes softening. "You're still his father, no matter what." That moment cracked something open inside me. I realized this wasn't just a birthday party, it was a crossroads. A chance to fight for my family in a way I hadn't before. As I looked at Evan, laughing freely, I promised myself I'd never let go again. Because sometimes, it takes losing everything to find what truly matters. After the party, the air between Leela, Grayson, and me was tense but different. Less hostile, more uncertain. For the first time in months, a door seemed slightly open. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Leela's feelings were complicated, and Grayson wasn't just some stranger. He was part of my son's life now. But that day reminded me that family isn't always perfect. It's messy, painful, and sometimes painfully beautiful. That night I sat alone in my apartment, replaying the birthday over and over. I thought about Evan's smile, about Leela's words, about the flicker of hope I felt. It was clear. If I wanted to be part of my son's life, I needed to be patient, steady, and most of all, present. I reached out to a family counselor, hoping to build a bridge, not just for custody battles, but for healing. The weeks that followed were filled with tough conversations. Leela admitted she felt trapped and lost in our marriage, that Grayson offered something she thought was missing. I listened without anger, trying to understand instead of blame. We started negotiating custody arrangements, slowly carving out moments where Evan could have both of his parents in his life, even if separately. It wasn't perfect. Sometimes I felt like I was taking 2 steps forward and 1 back. But every phone call, every weekend visit, every bedtime story told through a screen or in person reminded me why I fought. I also worked on myself. Therapy helped me face my fears, my pain, and my failures. I learned that being strong didn't mean hiding emotions. It meant showing up, even when it hurt. One evening, Evan hugged me tight after a visit and whispered, "I love you, Dad." Those words filled every crack in my heart. I realized then that a new beginning wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building something better, even if it took time. Months later, things weren't perfect, but they were better. The ache in my chest had softened into a steady rhythm of hope and effort. Evan was back in my life in a way that felt real, even if it wasn't the way I'd originally imagined. Leela and I had our moments of tension, but there was also understanding now. We weren't the same couple who had fallen in love years ago, but we were parents, united by a love for our son that neither money nor mistakes could erase. One afternoon, after a weekend visit, Evan ran into my arms with the kind of pure joy that only a child can give. I looked down at his bright eyes and messy hair and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. "I'm proud of you, buddy," I whispered. "You're stronger than you know." He smiled, squeezing my hand. In those moments, I realized something important. Forgiveness wasn't just for Leela or Grayson. It was for me too, forgiving myself for what I couldn't control, forgiving the pain, and choosing to move forward with an open heart. I kept recording my messages for Evan, but now I added something new, promises. Promises to be there, to listen, to never give up. Life would keep testing us. There would be hard days ahead, but I finally believed we could face them together in our own imperfect way. Because sometimes, the greatest gifts aren't wrapped in ribbons or tied to perfect plans. They're wrapped in second chances, forgiveness, and hope. And that's exactly what I was holding on to for Evan, for myself, and for the family we were still learning to be.